Hi, I'm John Antonakis. I'm Professor of Organizational Behavior at the Faculty of Business and Economics, HEC Lausanne at the University of Lausanne. So the election's over, and a couple of weeks ago, my co-author Philippe Jacquard at EM Lyon Business School in France and I presented an election prediction model where we suggested that Trump will win the US election. Now that the dust has settled, we will try and make sense of Trump's triumph and why most pollsters and pundits got it wrong. I got a flood of emails. I won many bets with friends, foes, even journalists. No one believed that Trump would win. Now, why did he win? In this videocast, I will answer 10 questions about the election. These are actual questions I got from people interested in our model, some comments, and in this way, I hope you will better understand why we made the prediction we did and how this might be informative for political scientists, political psychologists, and anyone else interested in election prediction models in the USA. So our model predicted that Trump would get 295 Electoral College votes. He actually got 312. Now, how did we get to that number, and how did we calculate that the probability he would win was around 70%? Now, if you haven't seen our video, it'll be the first link below the description. So I suggest you go there, watch the video, and then come back and see the rest of this video cast. So our model goes back in time to 1916, looks at the prevailing macroeconomic conditions, looks at incumbency variables, and looks at the charisma difference between the two candidates to make an ex-ante prediction for what will likely happen at the Electoral College outcome. So this little equation is what we used to predict the election outcome. Essentially, it looks at economic factors, how the economy is going, is it growing or not, is there inflation or not, how much good news was there. It looks to see who's an incumbent. If you're incumbent, you have an advantage. If your party's been in power too long, you have a disadvantage. And then it looks at the charisma difference between the two candidates. And this is where our model is rather different from other fundamental models which only use economic data. Now, Trump had a resounding victory. He won the trifecta, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. So he has a lot of power. Now, why did he win? I will start off with a little refrain from the 1992 election where Bill Clinton trounced George Herbert Walker Bush. You may remember the slogan was, "It's the economy, stupid." Now, the reason why they said that was to direct attention to prevailing economic conditions, and this is something that's really important for the electorate. If people feel like they're doing well, if people have jobs, if their investments in the stock market are going up, well, then they're happy, they will reward the incumbent party. And if they don't, they will not. So basically, Trump won because of three reasons. Firstly, GDP growth was okay-ish, but not that strong. Secondly, inflation was too high. And thirdly, he had a surplus of charisma relative to Kamala Harris. Now, what if the economy had been doing better? Would the Democrats have won? Let's ignore all the charisma parameters and look only at the economic factors. I'm going to focus on two, the growth rate and inflation. Now, the growth rate was not that high. It was 1.7, and inflation, the variable P, was at 4.54, which was pretty high if we compare it to other election races. Now, suppose G had been higher at 2.5% instead of 1.7. What would that have given the Democrats? 281 Electoral College votes. So what if inflation had been lower and taking into account also a higher G? If inflation had been, say, at 2.5% instead of 4.54, the Democrats would have won 342 electoral college votes. Now, this is crazy when you see the power of the economic model. That's why you shouldn't forget, it's the economy, stupid, but charisma matters too. Let's see why. Harris had a deficit of about 4% in terms of the charisma difference between her and Trump. She was at 49-22 and Trump was at 52-92. Now, this difference might seem small, but what we can do is to see, what does the economic model predict without charisma, and what does the model predict with charisma? If we only looked at the economy, Trump was predicted to win 273. When we add the charisma difference in there, it takes Trump's victory from 273 to 295. This means that charisma really matters. Now, you might not think that Trump is charismatic because you might not like his firebrand conservatism. But that doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what people who agree with Trump's values think. Same goes for Harris. If we take a random sample of people from Oklahoma, they might say that she's not charismatic, but in California she is. Now, what happens is, with the charisma variable, is the more one is charismatic, the more one galvanizes their troops to come and vote. And this is what happened. Trump had more charisma, and Harris did not have enough, and that's another reason why she lost. Now, let's hold all things constant. Let's assume that Harris inherits the macroeconomic variables that are associated with a Biden presidency. And imagine that G is the same and P is the same. What would have happened if she had had more charisma than Trump? So suppose she had 10 percentage points more than Trump. And given the paltry GDP growth and the high inflation, what does a model predict? Harris would have won with 281 electoral college votes. So she didn't win because she had this deficit. If the Democrats had selected somebody who were more charismatic, or if Trump had been less charismatic, or if Harris had worked on her charisma, perhaps she could have won. There were so many models out there saying she's going to win, he's going to win, it's a toss-up. It was complete confusion. Now let's just look at the main models, the ones that were covered in the press mostly. In general, the majority predicted a Harris victory or a toss-up. Let's run through a few of the most well-known models. The Economist magazine has a very serious model, and they use polling data, and they do a bunch of simulations. They use some fundamental analysis as well. They predicted on election day, using the most up-to-date data, that Harris would win with 276 electoral college votes. We have ABC's 538 model, which was inherited from Nate Silver, one of America's most famous statisticians. On the day of the election, they predicted Harris would get 270 electoral college votes. Nate Silver himself didn't make a call. He ran a few thousand simulations the morning of the election, and he predicted that 50.015% of the time, Harris would win. Now, why did they all get it so wrong? Your guess is as good as mine, but it's quite obvious that one major problem was the polling. It's very difficult to get a random probability sample. I mean, ideally, you should go around to every state, have every citizen, and then say, I'm going to pull out a sample of whatever, 1,000, and every citizen has an equal probability of being drawn, but that assumes that they will respond to the question, who would you vote for? The problem is that many individuals don't respond when they get called, when people come to the house and ask them who they're going to vote for. They don't respond. And oftentimes, systematically, those people are Trump supporters. So what happened is, and this happened now twice, it happened in the last two elections, is they undercounted or they underweighted the Trump voters. So, it's very, very hard then to rely on these things when you want to make a good guess about who is likely to vote. So this is why I think models like the one Philippe Jacquard and I have, that look at fundamentals, that look at prevailing economic conditions and see how they correlate with what usually happens. And it's very obvious. I mean, if people don't have jobs, why would they reward the incumbent party? Who cares about whether we should take a sample or not? Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that these fundamental models do such a good job. So more and more, I think we're going to see problems with polling, and the pollsters have to figure out a way how to do this. Maybe you need to draw a random sample and pay people to reveal their preference. I have no idea. But the polls for the time being, 3 times in a row to get it so wrong, and every single time it was not in Trump's favor, should give you pause to think. Not only that, we had Zeltser. A couple of days before the election, this famous Iowa poll came out where she suggested Harris would win it. I mean, when I saw this, I said, what? I mean, is she crazy? This is a serious pollster. How could she have gotten it so wrong? Then we had aggregators who took a bunch of different pollsters from these models, experts, what have you. Polyvote, which is a very serious aggregator of these predictions, also got it wrong. They predicted Harris would win 273 electoral college votes. And then we had the Nostradamus of election predictions, the famous Alan Lichtman. He said that Harris would win, and he doubled down, he tripled down that Harris would win. A couple of days after the election, he did eat a bit of humble pie and admitted that he got it wrong. Now, many people think that what he does is quite remarkable and that he had a really good record. He had predicted 9 out of the last 10 elections correctly ex ante. Now, it does seem a bit remarkable. Now, those of you who didn't see it, even my little doggy Joy predicted that Trump would win. If you haven't seen it, there was an article in Newsweek where I put treats in front of the photo of Trump and Harris, and my doggy went for Trump first. Now, I did this as a light-hearted commentary to show you that pundits who just guess on a binary outcome could get the result right just by chance alone. If you were to take 500 animals guessing randomly, one of them would get 9 out of 10 correct. This is what the binomial probability theorem suggests. Now, Mr. Lichtman has 9 out of 11 correct. What that suggests is if I took 100 animals and made them guess randomly, 3 of them would get 9 out of 11 correctly. Now, I don't want to get into arguments and spats with him. I know that he is now in a big match competition with Nate Silver on who's more correct. But if you look at the polls at the time when Lichtman had his predictions, in general, they concord completely with what Lichtman actually said. So he probably uses polls, and there's some obvious things where one can use to decide whether the election race will be called one way or another. Calling a binary outcome is easy. What's not easy is call the electoral college vote. It's not just who will win, but who will win by how much. And this is where I think the more serious statistical models should be looked at, and this is where we have a lot more work to do. A couple of models did get it right. Real Clear Politics, on the day of the election, predicted that Trump would win with 278 electoral college votes. Now, what they did is they aggregate polls from different pollsters, and they don't weight them. Now, other aggregators do weight the polls and do sift through them and do give a higher weighting to polls that they believe are more accurate. RCP doesn't care about that, and interestingly, they got it right. Virtual Tout also got it right. The day of the election, so this is a model that uses betting markets, predicted that Trump would win 280 electoral college votes. Now, these two are pretty close. Still, our model did a little better with much less data and just 2 little professors sitting in an office generating a few predictions. So yeah, we're a bit proud of ourselves. Now, were there any other reasons why Trump won? I don't know. Every election is idiosyncratic, so your opinion is as good as mine. Here's some things that I noticed that I think probably contributed to Trump's resounding victory. Tribal politics was one, and I think the Democrats are super guilty of that, especially with respect to what many in America perceived, well, many, let's say about half or maybe a bit more than half, a radical wokeism. Defending the rights of oppressed people, of minorities, of women. Now, I'm not here to say that we shouldn't do that, and there have been many wrongs historically that need to be corrected. That's not the point. I'm not here to make statements that are normative. I'm just trying to describe the state of the world. By playing these tribal politics and playing on woke themes, this alienated white people in America, especially white men who came out and voted en masse for Trump. Scott Galloway has a really nice interview. He's given several interviews about the theme that he calls aspirational masculinity. These white men, especially young white men, felt really threatened. The suicide rate of white men, young white men, is super high compared to other demographic groups. And Trump embodied and gave them hope that as men they would be able to reify their identity, be someone and make something of themselves. Just stop and think. When the majority of white women voted for Trump, then we need to reflect. Why? You can think what you want about Trump. You can think that he's racist. You can think that he's a misogyn. But when the majority of white women in America, which make a huge portion of the electorate, voted for Trump, stop and think. Trump made gains in almost every demographic group except black women. So it's really important that whoever runs for the US election doesn't divide but unites. Now, Trump divides, that's for sure. But I think that, ironically, tribal politics and radical wokeism divided even more. The other night I was talking to a friend who was debriefing her pupils, about 9, 10, 11 years old, regarding an initiative that their school had undertaken with the long-term goal of increasing the proportion of girls who enter in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And they were introducing a coding class that was exclusively for girls. Interestingly, this infuriated the boys who said it was very unfair. Actually, many of the girls thought it was unfair as well. And there was a big discussion in the class. And it was really amazing that 10-year-old kids see the ideas behind some of the movement to rectify the wrongs of the past maybe are going to cause problems and alienate certain sectors of society today. Now, I have 2 daughters, and I want my 2 daughters to have equal opportunities when they enter the labor market. But it's really important that there is equality of opportunity for everyone and that certain sectors don't feel like they will be discriminated against, and when it's not their fault that they were born with a certain sex or a certain skin color. Now again, I'm not saying we shouldn't correct the injustices of the past, but we need to take into account what people think today, not just the ones who will be discriminated, but also their mothers. 2 other things I'd like to say. I think it was really a bad idea to have Kamala Harris run against Donald Trump. Remember, Hillary Clinton lost against Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton, in my opinion, was probably the most experienced and the most competent person ever to run for the Oval Office, and she was not able to beat Trump. Now, how would another woman, who also is a woman of color, how was she going to manage to do that? So I think that was a mistake. I think America is not ready yet to elect a woman, and especially a woman of color. What should they have done, the Democrats? I think they should have had a competition. I think they should have at least arranged for one sooner. Certainly Biden should have stepped out much, much sooner than he did. He didn't give enough time for the Democrats to organize themselves. And to run against the Trump, I think the best choice would have been to have a white conservative Democrat. The only way you can fight Trump is with fire. Now, Trump won't be running again, so I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen. And I have a feeling that the choices that Trump's making now, I mean, for the different cabinet positions, is really going to fire up the Democrats. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen in the next election. If I had been advising Harris, I would have said, do not go down into that mud pit where Trump is. The more you throw around mud, the more it will stick at others, but the more it will stick on you. So I think it was really bad to define Trump as a fascist, as someone who was misogynic. I think it was not a good idea to speak only to women because that alienated many voters. I think many people at the end of the election race didn't really know what Kamala stood for. They knew that she didn't like Trump. They knew that she called him a fascist. They knew that she had some kind of ideas. But if you ask people specifically what kind of ideas, well, they didn't really buy what she said, or it didn't stick. You know, when someone wants a job, when someone knows their kid might not find a job, they don't care about some of these themes that she was really harping on. And to Trump, what would I say? Chill out, man. Take it easy. Don't let others get under your skin. Don't insult others. Act smarter. Be more elegant. Be kinder. Just be a nicer person. I think that Trump's demeanor cost him some vote. He could still embody this virile cowboy gunslinging attitude, but still do it in a kinder and gentler way. And you know, when Harris said, and by the way, she had a great zinger when she said, when I go to the Oval Office, I'm going with a to-do list, and my opponent Trump is going there with an enemy list. Trump could have said, a little piece of advice, yes, my opponent Harris is correct. I am going to the White House with an enemy list. And number one enemy is inflation. I'm going to bring it down. My number two enemy is this crazy immigration. Three enemy is paltry growth, etc., etc. Just be a bit smarter, chill out, and I hope that he does the same when he's president of the USA. To conclude, politics is in a flux. Voters in more and more countries are veering towards the right. It started with Trump 2 elections ago when he won. We saw Brexit. We see many European countries with right-wing governments, Orban in Hungary, in Italy, we have Meloni. We find similar themes everywhere: jobs, immigration, national identity. So I think these things should be seriously considered, especially by individuals who support parties that are more progressive. So this is, for me, as a social scientist, very interesting. I just hope that we see a calmer and more peaceful world in the future. Thank you for watching this videocast. If you liked it, send it to a friend. See you in 4 years when we make another prediction on who will win the Oval Office. Thank you.